Hello, I'm Gordon Lang, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Pentax Optio Z10. Here it is, the Optio Z10. This is an 8 megapixel compact camera with a difference. Where most compact cameras of this size and weight have got typical optical ranges of say 3 times or 4 times, the Z10 beats them with an optical range of 7 times. And that gives you great flexibility when you want to get that bit closer to distant subjects. The lens itself is hiding behind this sliding cover, which is also used to power the camera on and off. If I slide it open, the camera powers up, but you'll notice that the lens itself didn't actually extend. And this also counts when you're zooming the camera in. I'm now zooming it all the way in to its maximum equivalent focal length of 266mm. It's actually in that position right now, and you'll see the lens didn't extend. Similarly, when I zoom it all the way back out again to an equivalent of 38mm, that lens didn't move. In terms of the position of the lens, you'll see it's in the middle of the camera here, unlike a lot of compacts with non-extending lenses which have the lens in the corner. So that means that when you're holding the camera with 2 hands, this finger is not going to get in the way as easily, although you still have to be reasonably careful where you hold it. Now let's take a closer look at the Z10's controls. The top of the Optio Z10 is very clean. In fact, the only control you'll find is this rectangular shutter release at the end. The rest of the controls are located to the right of the 2.5-inch screen on the rear. You'll find a zoom rocker, a play button, the usual 4 buttons here for navigating menus and scrolling around images, along with of course giving you quick access to things like the macro mode and the self timer, and underneath a menu button and another button here labelled with a green rectangle. This can be configured in the Z10's menus to bring up a quick access function menu, allowing you to easily change things like the sensitivity, the quality, the white balance or the exposure compensation. Round the side are a couple of flaps. Behind this one at the top is a combined USB output and TV output. Behind this one at the bottom is a DC input. Underneath the camera is where you'll find access to the battery and memory card, but unlike most compact cameras, they're in separate areas. The battery compartment is down here at this side, and you'll see the battery is quite long and thin. The memory card slot is located at the other side of the camera, and if I flip that open, you'll see that the Z10 takes SD memory cards. Now we're outside with the Optio Z10, so let's flip back that front cover and see how long it takes to power up. That was about 1.5 seconds. Now let's check out the optical zoom range of this camera. Here we are zoomed out at an equivalent of 38mm. And now zoomed all the way in to its maximum 7 times optical range. This is working at an equivalent of 266mm, and you can see it's really allowing me to get much closer to these subjects. However, the one thing this camera doesn't have, which is a real shame, is image stabilization, either optical or sensor shift. So if you want to eliminate camera shake, you're going to have to make sure you're using a sufficiently fast shutter speed. Now, one of the interesting options on the Z10 is its digital wide angle capability. Now, this lens only zooms out to an equivalent of 38mm, which isn't particularly wide, but by zooming out a bit further, it says, do you want to use the digital wide mode? What this does is actually let you use it in a kind of stitch or a panoramic type way and take 2 photos that overlap to give an equivalent coverage of 28mm. So here's how it works. Let's take one picture. And now it's going to ask us to line this up with another, approximately there. It's now processing the image. This takes a few seconds, and it's also worth pointing out that the image that you get at the end is not at the maximum resolution. It's actually at a reduced resolution of 5 megapixels. But here comes the picture. So here we are with a stitch shot that's equivalent to 28mm. Like all compact cameras, you can overlay various graphics on the screen. If I press the OK button, we can get some shooting information there and a live histogram. Unfortunately though, there's no grid option. Pressing the green button here can do various things depending on how it's been configured in the menu. I've configured it to work a bit as a function key. So if I press that, it gives us very quick access to various settings. I've configured it so that if I push the arrow upwards, we can change the ISO setting. If I do it to the right, we can change the white balance, to the bottom, the resolution, and to the left, the actual compression setting, but you can configure that any way you like. To configure these menus, you go into the main menu system. Here they are. You can see you can also adjust the quality from within here and things like the sensitivity. What's quite impressive about the Z10 though, for a compact is that it also allows you to adjust the sharpness and the saturation and the contrast. Just finally, let's have a quick look at some of the modes that are on offer. If I press the mode button, you get some very colourful icons here, along with instructions on what each of those will use. Things like a night scene, a movie mode, surf and snow, and the obligatory pet mode these days, as you can see, gives you both dogs and cats, although Pentax itself will admit that some of the cat and dog modes are in fact the same. The best thing about the Pentax Optio Z10 is of course its 7x optical zoom lens, and that gives it much greater compositional flexibility than most compact cameras that are out there with say 3 or 4 times ranges. And this lens remains in the camera at all times, even when it's fully zoomed in. What's really impressive about this lens though is that unlike most compact cameras, you can actually zoom it while you're filming a video. And it's also so quiet, the motor that's used to adjust that zoom range, that it becomes a really practical proposition to adjust it while you are filming a video. So that's something that really separates the Z10 from other compacts that are out there. However, this camera has one really big problem, and that is a lack of either sensor shift or optical image stabilization. Now the Z10 does have stabilization, but it's digital, and what that means is that it just increases the sensitivity. That will of course allow the camera to use faster shutter speeds and therefore eliminate camera shake, but it does so at the cost of reduced image quality. If you head on over to our full review at cameralabs.com, you'll see sample images with this camera taken at all ISO settings, and you'll see that like most compacts above say 200 ISO, the quality is not looking that great anymore, and it's a shame that this camera relies on those high sensitivities to reduce the possibility of camera shake. But perhaps the biggest problem facing this camera is the competition. Now there aren't many compact cameras with big optical zoom ranges, but there is one that's particularly good, and that's the Panasonic Lumix TZ3. Now this may have 7 times, but the Panasonic has 10 times. It starts wider at an equivalent of 28mm and ends slightly longer at an equivalent of 280mm, and crucially the TZ3 comes with optical stabilization and a bigger 3-inch screen. Now the TZ3 is a slightly more expensive camera, but it's not that much more, and we'd say it's definitely worth spending the extra. Now of course those prices were at the time we made this video. By the time you see this, there may be more compelling prices available on the Z10, so keep an eye on those. And again, if you head on over to the full review at cameralabs.com, you'll see current pricing for this and rival cameras. So as it stands in isolation, the Z10 is an okay camera, but it does have some rivals that are much more compelling. To see the full review and pricing for the Z10 along with sample images, head on over to our full review. You'll find it at www.cameralabs.com.